House of Representatives commences investigation into attack on the custody center.
Whatever is expected of us to assist in this investigation, the Nigerian Correctional Service will definitely cooperate with the company.
Notorious Taraba-based kidnap kingpin is back 7 years of prison.
More communities in Jigawa State live in fear as flood continues to wreak havoc.
Upon receiving this unfortunate news, President Muhammad Buhari directed to activate the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, to respond in providing necessary support to the affected persons.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, Paris Club refund and manager recovered food via food.
Right, we are yet to hear the last of the Paris Club loan refund controversy, and that's of course the reform to states and local government councils.
This followed the controversy being generated by the remarks of the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice at the 46th session of the State House ministerial briefing in Abuja.
Now, the Attorney General of the Federation, who is also the Chief Law Officer of the country, says the state governors have no right to complain over a deduction of $418 million allegedly meant for consultants said to have been hired by the state governors and local government councils.
And clear reports indicate that the state governors had agreed to engage some consultants to provide certain services for them as it's related to the Paris Club recovery, but kicked against the settlement after an initial part payment to the said consultants without federal government's intervention.
All right, so this has to a large extent demonstrated the governor's recognition and acknowledgement of their liability over the issue in contention.
But why did the state governments now insist on halting the payment of the $480 million to the consultants after signing the necessary documents to that effect? And why did the Governors Forum engage the consultants in the first place?
Well, did they? That's another question. So what informed their decision to ask for stoppage of the payment, initial part payment, and resort to out-of-court settlement? What could this decision amount to, or rather, we should be asking, could this decision amount to breach of contractual agreement if there was an agreement? Because the governors, Nadabu, alleging that there was no agreement in the first place.
Yeah.
And in fact, so many issues arising, from the refund, Paris Club refund wahala, and well.
That prompts us to be here this morning, really,
Exactly.
to just look at this and then deeply see what exactly is there in the $480 million
And the Attorney
controversy.
General is saying that the cries of the governors is just a mere noise, according to him. Anyway, that will be our focus today. We'll also be looking at deployment of recovered loot. I'm sure we hear, the recovery is being made daily. It's been reported. So what has happened to them or what is happening to them? This is Good Morning Nigeria, and we are live on the network service of the NTA. I am Claire Adilabo Abdulrazak. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Yusuf Dadabu Suman. Thank you once again for joining us. We shall bring to you the, much needed complementary, segments of this program in order to wait up or warm up the morning if it's really cold somewhere wherever you are.
It's
And
been cold. It's fighting cold.
yeah.
And I can see Tessie and Mary smiling. She came in here this morning looking rather, well, I don't know, Tessie.
Say, looking rather what?
As if you want to go back to bed.
Really, it's the weather. It's really a very beautiful weather for you to be at home. But what can you do? You have to be here to serve your country. Good morning, Nedabo and Claire. Hello, good morning, Nigerians, and here is the morning news. The House of Representatives Joint Committee on Reformatory Institutions and National Security and Intelligence has commenced investigation into the attack on the Kuji Custodial Center. The lawmakers visited the facility to get first-hand information relating to the July 5th, 2022 attack.
Which attack was carried out without any resistance by the security guards or arrest of any of the terrorists during the operation or after till date.
What really happened in the last attack of this center?
Whatever is expected of us to assist in this investigation, the Nigerian Correctional Service will definitely cooperate with the committee.
A federal high court sitting in Abuja has sentenced the notorious Taraba-based kidnap kingpin Hamisu Subala, popularly called Wadumi, to 7 years in prison without fine. The presiding judge, Justice Binta Nyako, in her judgment, said the court was satisfied that indeed Wadumi was guilty of dealing in prohibited firearms and escaping from custody. Meanwhile, another defendant in the matter, Police Inspector Aliu Daji, is to serve 3 years in prison for tampering with police records to conceal the crime, while 3 other defendants are also to serve various sentences for their roles in the crime. Integrated Television Services and NTA Star TV Limited have signed a memorandum of understanding designed to help fast-track the ongoing digital switchover project.
This MOU, ITS will utilize the structure and facilities of NTA Star, a terrestrial pay-TV platform spread across the country for signal distribution. In other words, ITS will henceforth become the signal distributor on the structure of NTA Star. In essence, the signing of this MOU has given effect to the white paper on DSO, which bars terrestrial pay TV from self-carrying Nigeria.
This signing ceremony will now translate into having very good and clear signals to Nigerians. And of course, we are going to bridge the gaps that hitherto has been existing, because we are going to have a wider coverage where we can go into all the nook and crannies of the country. And by and large, we are also going to create employment opportunities for our teaming youth who are unemployed.
Content is key. So you have multiple content as it is, as against analog era where you have a single content on a particular channel. Now you have multiple contents, so there will be competition of contents. So the TV will actually have a lot of things on their hand, have multiple channels on their hands to watch, and definitely with the good content, TV are good to go.
National Insurance Commission has received its marching order to develop and implement policies geared towards repositioning and strengthening the insurance sector to enhance its contribution to Nigeria's gross domestic product (GDP). Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning Zainab Ahmed threw the challenge when she received members of the board of NICON.
We are pleased to inform the Minister that we are working hard to provide solutions to curb the ugly trend of insurance failure by way of instituting strong regulatory measures in the board. The board is working to sanitize the market and will be taking out companies that are not measuring up to expectation.
First of all, your enforcement should be from within the industry. They must follow the guidelines of the Commission. We should address the issue of poor claim settlement, to be able to make it interesting for citizens to want to comply with insurances. Yes.
More communities in Jigawa State are living in fear as flood continues to wreak more havoc across residential areas and farmland, with the state authorities confirming the loss of 50 people in the disaster.
I lost my house and two of my farms. I don't know how to survive now.
Every ministry will take responsibility of the victims affected in terms of health, education, feeding, and so on.
Upon receiving this unfortunate news, President Muhammad Buhari directed the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development to activate the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, to respond in providing necessary support to the affected persons.
The Chief of Staff to President Professor Ibrahim Gambari has attributed Nigeria's upward trajectory in critical economic sectors to the enormous goodwill President Buhari enjoys from the global community. This was at a reception he organized in honor of two principal officers of the President conferred with the National Honors of the Republic of Nigeria. They are the Senior Special Assistant on Household and Domestic Matters, Serki Abba, and the State Chief of Protocol, Ambassador Lawal Kazauri. Professor Ibrahim said the well-deserved honor by President Mohammed Bazoum further attests to the high esteem the Nigerian leader is regarded internationally for his leadership style.
Of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who recognize that the prosperity and security of Nigeria depends on the prosperity and the security of our neighboring countries. So for those neighboring countries to recognize Nigeria and Nigerians by giving this honor, symbolize the improvement or the deepening of Nigerian relationship, but also is a recognition of the wisdom of President Buhari's foreign policy then as well as now. It's also an embodiment of the affinity between us and Nigeria.
And that's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria continues with Claire and Nadabo after this break. Thanks for watching.
Nigeria's headline inflation for July 2022 increased to 19.64% on a year-on-year basis, indicating 2.27% surge. Details of this and more on Business News with Comfort Amadou.
The 19.64% surge in Nigeria's headline inflation for the month of July 2022 shows a 2.27% increase year-on-year, in contrast to the rate recorded in July 2021, which was 17.38%. The data released this Monday by the National Bureau of Statistics indicates that the headline inflation was higher than the rate recorded in June 2022 by 1.816%. Looking at the urban and rural distribution of consumer price index rate at 20.09% in July 2022 on a year-on-year basis, which is higher when compared to 18.01% reported in July 2021. On a month-on-month basis, the urban inflation rate was 1.82% in July 2022. The NBS report attributes the upsurge in inflation to the distribution in the supply of food productions, increase in the cost of transportation stemming from the higher cost of energy. Also, increase in import cost due to currency depreciation, as well as the general upsurge in the cost of production, is said to be responsible for the current rise in inflation. It was a negative start at Nigerian's equities markets on Monday, as it further dipped to close at 49,657.33 basis points. At the close of trading for the day, investors in 4,189 and 22 deals exchanged 210.8 million shares valued at 2.1 billion naira. Market capitalization at the end of the day was 26.7 trillion naira. eTransact, FBN Holding, and GBA were the top 3 traded stocks. With business news, Comfort and Modu.
Right, that was Comfort Amado on Business News. Coming up next will be our newspaper review.
And of course, Bayo Atoyebi is already in the house. You're welcome, Bayo.
Good morning, Yusuf. Good morning, Claire.
Good morning, Bayo.
Good morning, Nigeria.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
We have a couple of papers, a bit three, I think, here. So we look at the, front page stories and then see what there is. Let's get started with the Nation newspaper and then see what we have on the front page of the Nation newspaper this beautiful Tuesday morning. Above the masthead, we can see some three stories there. The one right from the left is the one on the story on page 2, which says NCDC confirms 15 monkeypox cases. 15 monkeypox cases, if I may add, in Nigeria. And then on page 7, electricity workers set to battle TCM. On page 22 of the Nation newspaper this morning, Naseni to train 3,700 youths in modern farming. And on page 5, commercial activities pick up in Southeast. Moving down a little under the masthead, we have the following stories. IG rewards Kano DPO for rejecting $200,000 bribe. IG rewards Kano DPO for rejecting $200,000 bribe. Details of that on page 2. And on page 28, Ganduje nominates 8. For what? Get the details on page 8. 19.64% inflation rate, highest ever in 17 years, says NBS, National Bureau for Statistics, and goes on to add the rate jumps by 1.82% in 1 month. And then the World Bank ex-FCCI chief worried about this. The details of this on page 4. The main story on the Nation newspaper, in the Nation newspaper today is, Ayu to Wiki others, I have no plan to quit PDP chair now. And he says, I was elected for 4 years in an absence of political stalls peace party. That's another rider. And you get details of that too on page 4. Moving down a little, federal government not sincere about Indian strike, says ASU, and the union meets education minister and others today. So we hope this meeting brings us something great and better. Details of that on page 5. At the bottom, or rather at the foot of the page, you have this story that says Yobe not senatorial ticket. Court adjourns Machina's suit against Lawan. Details on page 3. Claire, what do you have?
All right, I have leadership and I also have another paper, but let me begin with leadership, which has, again, the story on the PDP national chairman's reaction to Governor of Rivers State. It said the headline reads, PDP crisis deepens. That's the leadership. Ayu calls Wike's bluff, says he has 4-year tenure. Again, Ayu calls Wike's bluff, says he has 4-year tenure, and that story is on page 7. It, of course, it has the rider denies submitting resignation letter to David Mark, and party leaders meet on Atiku Wike reconciliation on Friday. Also on that front page, you can also see the story just above the nameplate, a little below the nameplate. It says, darkness looms as electricity workers embark on strike tomorrow. That tomorrow, I'm sure, will be today. Bayo will clarify that for us later. Again, darkness looms as electricity workers embark on strike tomorrow. That's the leadership. We also have other stories just atop the nameplate. Monkeypox. Nigeria records 60 new cases in 19 states. Monkeypox. Nigeria records 60 new cases in 19 states. And of course, on the other side, you find interest rate hike likely as Nigeria's inflation hits 19.64%. And indeed, some people have even predicted that we may be going as high as 20%. But that is 19.64%, the latest inflation rate. And also on the front page of the leadership, I bring you just down below, a little below, you find Ruto, that's going to Kenya. Ruto wins Kenya's presidential election, vows to work with all leaders. And just this morning, we hear some of the election commissioners have resigned. Of course, dissociated themselves from that result. So we don't know what might happen later. But the results now says Ruto wins Kenya's presidential election, and that's how it states. Let me quickly look at our next paper, the National Star. And the National Star is leading with, again, the new inflation rate. It says inflation jumps by 2.26%, hits 17-year high at 19.64%. That's the National Star. National Star, again, lead story, it's on the inflation rate. And then there are two riders to the headline. Highest increases recorded in prices of gas, liquid fuel, solid fuel, and others. Highest increases recorded in prices of gas, liquid fuel, solid fuel, and others. Now, Taraba, Gombe, Niger record slowest rise in the month-on-month inflation. Now, that's the National Star giving us a bit of the details of what has happened with our inflation. It says Taraba, Gombe, Niger recorded the slowest rise in month-on-month inflation. Okay, also see that story again on the looming strike. Again here, the National Star, gives us more detail. It says the strike will begin on Wednesday. Okay, let's look at some of the other trending stories. Some Rivers PDP elders plotting against me. That's attributed to Wike. The details of that on page 13. Court jails kidnap Kingpin Wadume for 7 years on page 17. Some people think that's too small. Ruto wins Kenya's presidential election on page 19. I think that's the outlook of the National Star. Let's bring in Bayo here. Bayo, you've been looking at.
Thank you. Let me start with the report on the inflation. The National Bureau of Statistics has reported that July inflation rate has risen to 19.64% compared to that of the previous month, June, which was 18.60. So there has been an increase of about 2.4%. This is registered mostly in the said to be the highest in 17 years. The Statistics General of Nigeria, Semiu Adenika, says that the core microeconomic indicators was used in determining the inflation rate. And what did he find? He found that urban inflation rate was about 20.08%, while rural inflation was about 22%. Just about the same time last year, it was 16.75%, while the rural inflation then was about, the increase now was about 2.8% increase. Invariably, whenever rural inflation increases, the tendency is that you see the consequences in urban areas because most of the food we consume come from the rural areas. On the issue of the nation being plunged into darkness that Yusuf, you read earlier on, yes, this indication was given by the National Union of Electricity Employers, and they are saying that today they are going to picket the Transmission Company of Nigeria. And if nothing results from their picketing, by tomorrow, they are threatening to plunge the whole nation into darkness. Why? Well, their explanation is that they have officers who are in the position of PMS, that is principal managers, and they are supposed to move to the position of acting capacity as AGM. But the board in their wisdom are saying that they have now to appear before a promotion interview. And they are resisting. Because of that, they are threatening to impose a blackout of the nation because, one, they say that this contravenes the condition of service and their career progression. And secondly, it was done unilaterally without consulting the stakeholders. They are threatening total withdrawal of services nationwide tomorrow. I hope sense will prevail because principal managers have challenges about their promotion to assistant general manager. Is that sufficient to plunge the whole nation into darkness?
That's what I'm thinking about, really. I don't know. I mean, there are procedures in whatever, especially in civil service, in promotions and the rest of them. And then in almost every other federal government, establishment, the interview thing and the quota thing, prevail in getting to the next level. So I don't see why, the workers or the unions are trying to really put up this case where there is none at all. I mean, clear, it sounds like
No, but
we're trying to take
if their terms of service does not, include this having to go for interview to progress to this particular level,
yes,
and it's only been, enforced now.
Yes.
They have a right to seek redress, but certainly not, as you rightly said.
Principal managers to go to AGM because of that.
Because you plunge the whole
nation
exactly.
into
So
darkness.
that's ridiculous. But to say that they shouldn't pursue their rights, legitimate
certainly.
right if it is another thing.
Still talking about strike, there is a meeting of the federal government delegation and the academic staff union today, and the issues are the current issues that are actually taking the strike. Today, the strike is in its 183rd day when it started February 14th. There has been apparent stalemate since the Professor Mimi Briggs report committee was submitted. 2 weeks ago, the Academic Staff Union extended their own strike by another 4 weeks. On July 19th, the president gave directives giving 2 weeks to the Minister of Education to find a means of resolving this issue. That timeline expired 2 weeks ago. The ongoing strike commenced February 14th, and the issues are still release of revitalization fund, renegotiation of 2009 federal government ASU agreement, release of earned allowances for lecturers, and also deployment of UTAS to replace IPs, among others. The Daily Trust is reporting that the Minister of State for Labor, Festus Keyamo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, is saying that the ASU is on strike because of the 2009 agreement, according to him, which was negotiated by the PDP-led federal government. He says that Mr. Koyama, who is now the spokesman for the APC presidential candidate, said that since 1999 and 2015, ASU went on strike 12 times for a total of 900 days. He said an agreement was signed but couldn't be fulfilled. He says that the current administration inherited that agreement and it has to negotiate. He emphasized, we are not shifting blame. We are going to tackle the problem.
Let's hope they do so, really, and then get these students and the awards and children back to school. It's 6 months, really, and it's beyond imagination, really, having to stay that long. But that's Nigeria. We've got to really, stay with that and then see how, we get across and then find lasting solution to it. Most likely, lasting solution is going to come because it has taken too long in trying to get across to that.
I'm usually a bit emotional when I speak about the issue, this lingering, face-off between ASU and government, because as we know, the proverbial saying is that when two big elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. So it's not just the students now, but also us as parents.
Yes.
We are suffering. And
interestingly, there are lecturers too that are parents.
Well, if you extrapolate the economy also is suffering.
Yes.
Nigeria is suffering because there are students who ought to have, graduated, who ought to, be mainstreamed.
Move on with their life. Go to NYSC
exactly.
and other things.
It stagnated. We're
Already
not moving.
2 sets of admission by JAM are on a stranglehold.
Exactly. And we're thinking of ways of, rejuvenating, rebloating, reflating our economy, and our education is as a standstill. Both parties should actually come together and know that it is a moral duty on them, to get this strike off the ground. There's a moral responsibility on both our lecturers and on the students and on the federal government to ensure that, the students get back to the classroom.
A lesson is to be learned from Lagos, where 129-year-old Sani Garba was apprehended in Badia area, and he was almost lynched based on the speculation that he was dressed like a woman. But luckily, the police came in and saved him. And when he was searched, he was holding a bag, and they found in that bag tools, including hammers, screws, and other things. And when he was asked, he says he's an electrician. The police now say they are investigating. The Commissioner of Police for Lagos has advised members of the public that it's good to be vigilant, but when you see any suspicious thing, rather than take laws into your hand, report to security agencies. That young man would have been lynched were it not for the intervention of the police. Meanwhile, they are investigating to find out whether he's actually a terrorist, as was alleged, or an electrician, as he has claimed.
Bayo, and Yusuf, there's a video I saw online, and it got me real worried. It's a video of the new tactics that these big boys, in quote, now deploy to conceal arms and ammunition. I don't know if any one of you, if you've seen it. It's a log of wood split into two, with some form of, holes bored, inside to make way for, the gun. And then the gun, the pump rifle gun is, concealed in it within the log wood. And then it is, in fact, you won't even know. You won't know there's anything inside of it. It's trending on the online, and I hope that our security agent, are aware of that.
It's good that they are revealing them. There have been other instances where they have shown arms hidden in bag of foodstuffs. There are others that have been shown where arms are folded on a motorcycle under the seat. So there are several instances. So security has to be extra vigilant.
Yes.
And we, too, members of the public, we need to help the security whenever we see such suspicious things.
Yes.
So that we can help.
The saying still remains, and it still remains very relevant, that if you see something, say something, most especially talking about the log,
yes.
The story by your read about suspicious movements and characters and behaviors.
Yeah.
I see a guy, well dressed, and then whatever kind of dress he has with a log. I mean, you start asking, what for? Why are you headed? So that's it. And Bayo, at this point, I think we must thank you for being giving us those insights into the newspapers you've gone through. Tomorrow is going to be another day. Thank you very much.
We'll see you tomorrow, Bayo.
See you.
Now, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We're reaching you from the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take your break now. Stay with us.
All right, welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria this Tuesday, and we're live from our studios here in Abuja. Today, our focus will be on the issue surrounding the Paris Club refund to state governors. Of course, the controversy surrounding it. We won't also be looking at that. We'll also be looking at it vis-a-vis, of course, the current economic situation, and also looking at the deployment of our looted funds. Don't go away. We'll take this background report and we'll be back in a moment.
The Paris Club became popular in Nigeria in 2005 when the club judged the federal government's economic reforms as far-reaching and cancelled 60% of the country's $30 billion debt. Between 1995 and 2002, before the debt was written off, the federal government had agreements with state governments to deduct certain amounts from their federal allocation to service the debt. In April this year, the 36 states of the Federation urged the federal government not to tamper with funds accruing to them and the 774 local councils under the guise of satisfying $418 million London Paris Club loan refund related judgment debts after making an initial part payment to the said consultants based on the agreement signed between them. On its part, the federal government claimed the state governors had no basis for complaining about the Paris Club refund deductions paid to consultants they hired. On the management of recovered loot, the federal government maintains that from March 2021 to May 2022, it had recovered over 3.2 billion naira of looted funds from various countries. It further notes that the stolen monies have been disbursed into key infrastructure projects nationwide, including the Second Niger Bridge, the Abuja-Kanu Road, and the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. How can the lingering controversy over the Paris Club refund be resolved? Are there mechanisms monitoring the management of the recovered loot? What more can be done towards the recovery of the country's looted funds? These and more will engage guests as they speak to issues on the Paris Fund refund and managing recovered loot shortly.
Yes, we're right there talking about the Paris Fund, Paris Club refund. And joining us in the studio this morning to discuss the topic is Abubakar Malami, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice. Welcome to Good Morning, Nigeria, sir.
Thank you. Good morning,
Nigeria. And also joining us from our Benin studio is Reverend David Ogalo, Executive Director, African Network for Environmental and Economic Justice. Good to have you on Good Morning, Nigeria, Reverend.
Thank you very much, my brother.
So looking forward to really having His Excellency, the Governor of Kaduna State, Nasiru Ahmed El-Rufai, who will be joining us any moment. His Zoom connection gets ready, and we have him there to really join us on this in the discussion on the, Paris Club refund. Good morning, gentlemen, once again. Let's get started. Let's look at what we have really and what we can really have and discuss about this topic, starting with the Honorable Minister and Attorney General of the Federation. Paris Club refund. The controversy has been on and on and on and on between the federal government and the states, talking about the $418 million specifically now as to whether it should be deducted from the state government's money or it should not be, as they say. How did we arrive at this? What's really happening? This is a jolly, nice journey that started. Nigerians were happy about it. Money's come and they were being given their, leave allowances, pension allowances, and whatever, supplementing what government has. And here we are today in a quagmire of about $480 million.
Well, for the purpose of giving a historical insight as to what constitutes Paris Club and indeed the subsequent deductions relating thereto, I think it is important to give the general public an idea as to how it all started.
Okay.
Nigeria was indebted to Paris Club, and arising from that the indebtedness, a decision was taken to negotiate and offset or perhaps liquidate the entire amount, on which account the Nigerian government, under the leadership of President Obasanjo, now agreed with the Paris Club for a debt buyback, the implication of which is to agree on a compromise amount to be paid by Nigeria, which is concessional, and then Nigeria will pay. Now, agreement was reached as to what concessional and compromise amount should be paid, and deductions commenced from the consolidated revenue account for the purpose of addressing and paying up and buying back, indeed, the amount as agreed upon between Nigeria and Paris Club. Now, over time, deductions were being made from the consolidated revenue account, and now the contention that set in. The state governors and indeed the local governments contended that there were indeed over-deductions. And that over-deductions allegation by the local government and indeed the state governments now resulted into reconciliation exercise. It was at that point that the Association of Local Government now engaged the services of certain consultants. Before you is a letter evidencing such engagement, which letter is dated September 15, 2011. That was the genesis of the engagement between the consultants and the Association of Local Governments of Nigeria. As Algon. By that letter, which was addressed to the managing partner of Edwards and Partners Law Firm, they were engaged. Kindly accept this letter I read with your permission.
Go ahead.
As our instruction for your law firm to use its best efforts to represent us, represent the Association of Local Government, for and on behalf of the 774 local government areas of Nigeria, as our solicitor, legal representative, and consultants in our ongoing efforts to get the federal government of Nigeria to refund the local government share of funds it converted from the consolidated revenue fund for loan, debt, buyback, and exit. And then in the letter, it is stated in the third paragraph of the letter, our mandate is that you use your best efforts in collaboration with Linus International Limited to obtain the refunds due to the local government. So the implication of the letter by Algon, signed under the hand of Honorable Engineer UK Ibrahim, the chairman, Board of Trustees of Algon, was that Edward and Partners, together with Linus International, were engaged by Algon to seek for refunds of the over deductions arising for the deductions of the consolidated revenue account.
Has there been, or is there any amount in contention in this?
I will get there to the amount.
Okay.
So the two consultants eventually issued out a letter dated 2nd October 2014 accepting the offer for the recovery exercise. And then at the end of the day, there was a reconciliation, and then the local government was said to be entitled to 3,188,078,505.96 and then arising from the perhaps the professional services rendered by the consultant, this amount was eventually adjudged payable to the local government as being recoveries made at the instance of consultants through their services. But then the point of interest is not even about the reconciliation exercise, the instruction, but the fact that subsequently, that is in 2013, when this amount was eventually not paid as of 2013, Linus and incorporated trustees of the Association of the Local Government, I'm talking of the Algon in these circumstances, jointly, the two of them jointly instituted an action in court. What may interest you against who? And the answer is provided by a court order. The action was instituted against the federal government of Nigeria, Attorney General of the Federation, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Accountant General of the Federation, and indeed the Central Bank of Nigeria. That was the content, that was the, those were the parties.
Parties to the suit.
Parties to the suit, the Linus, one of the consultants, and the ALGO, their board of trustees, instituted an action against the interests of the federal government, seeking for what? Seeking for the payment of the 188,505,505.96 to the judgment debtor. Who is the judgment debtor in the circumstances? The liners, one of the consultants for that matter. And for your information, the consultants are jointly engaged by who? By ALGO. And here is ALGO now joining the consultants to institute an action against the federal government, seeking that that payment be made to who? To the consultant. Now, arising from judgment, the implication of the judgment is that the asset of the federal government, inclusive of perhaps maybe the foreign reserve in the central bank, would be attached in settlement of the judgment sum. The judgment that is meant to be for the benefit of who? ALGO. At whose instance? At ALGO's instance.
And the contractor.
And the consultant. That is where the point of divergence, contention, controversy, and dispute arose between the federal government and indeed the state and local government. So, again, the second party.
Yes. Okay.
The second party, because I was talking of earlier on of Linus, who was the first consultant. The second consultant again instituted a separate action in 2015. 2015, certainly shortly before the coming in place of the government of President Muhammadu Buhari. And the parties in that case are Dr. Ted Edward, and then the action is instituted against incorporated trustees this time around of Association of Local Government by Ted Edward, seeking for the same professional fees.
Who are parties to the suit now?
The parties to the suit are Ted Edward, who is practicing under the name and style of Edwards and Partners Law Firm, against incorporated trustees of Nigeria. That action, which was instituted in 2015 this time around by the second consultant, was deliberately not contested, not defended by ALGO. It was a case on the undefended list. And what happened? I will take you through the judgment. By the judgment, the Federal High Court now stated expressly that the records of the, look at the declaration being sought, which is the case of the Ted Edward, whether the recovery of proceeds are paid to the local government directly through, I will take you through the prayers. The major prayer is a declaration that the plaintiff is entitled to the sum of 318,807,000,000, which constitute their professional fees this time around. $807,950.59 being our legal consultancy management fees. So when deductions were made, judgment was obtained in their favor. And then the consultant now instituted an action seeking for a court judgment in their favor, confirmation of their entitlement. And that action was instituted in 2015. And it was, it was against ALGO, Incorporated Trustees of Association of Local Government of Nigeria, ALGO. And they did not defend it in court. That was in 2015. Now, what happened? Arising from that, again, they sought for an order. Who? The Ted Edward, the consultant, sought for an order for the payment of this amount. Against who? That is the point of interest to you. The order was sought against Central Bank of Nigeria, among others. And the implication is the funds in the Central Bank, which could be the funds of the federal government, may be attached in satisfaction of the judgment. So
Honorable Minister, if we go on, this program will not end.
It is important.
Yes,
but I will get to a
But
point.
in all of what you have said so far,
Yeah.
I've not heard of the Nigeria Governors Forum as part of the.
In a minute, you will. So eventually, when these judgments were obtained, directing that attachment should be effected against the central bank, we now wrote to Algon seeking for their position on this. And then by a letter dated September 8th, 2017, they wrote no objection to the payment of legal fees. The Algon this time around wrote to the Office of the Attorney General by a letter dated 8th September 2017, stating no objection to the payment of legal fees of $318 million to Edwards and Partners Law Firm, in line with the Department of State Security Services report and judgment. When we eventually were confronted with this judgment, we took steps to find out whether there were some fraudulent undertones and engaged EFCC and DSS to look into it and advise us. And they wrote that apparently arising from this, taking into consideration the letter of instruction, taking into consideration the resolutions and minutes of the Algon, taking into consideration the judgments of tenths, which judgments were indeed, in fact, and a law justified. They now, DSS and EFCC wrote to us. And then we wrote and forwarded the reports to Algon and Governors Forum. This is the situation we are in. What is your position? And then Algon wrote by a letter dated September 8th, 2017, that we have no objection. This is
But let me ask you, Honorable Minister, can you help us in bullet form? Let us understand what exactly are the points of contention raised by the Governors Forum.
The point of contention raised by the Governors Forum is that there was a change of leadership much later. And then after the change of leadership, they are now contesting that the federal government should not be deducting in settlement of this judgment. So, but then a point of interest that may interest you is even after we were in receipt of a notice of no objection from Algon, we wrote to the governors individually. And for your information, these are the letters of it. And the federal government stated expressly in the letters to Governors Forum that, look, if we are to embark on these deductions, and then there is any liability taken into consideration that the federal government was made a party, you will be responsible. And they now wrote independent and individual letters of indemnity signed under the hand of the governor.
You know what? What I want the Honorable Minister of Justice to speak to really.
Yes.
It's because these are all technical issues.
Yes.
You know, yes, legal technical issues. But we want to look at it from the perspective of one or two points that they have raised, which is how it affects, one, the economy of the states, the interests and welfare of Nigerians at this point in time. With the kind of economic, trap that states governments are, how would you evaluate such deductions, from the federation account, directly from the federation account?
Well, you see, when you are talking of the economic situation of a country, I think by prevailing laws, by position of things and democratic process, the governors are and indeed the chairman of the local government are the custodians of such consideration. What matters to judiciary is the legality or otherwise of the issue in contention. And above all, as custodians of that economic consideration and policies and their execution and implementation, the governors individually and collectively wrote by an individual indemnity dated 29th November, because with all this, the judgment of the court, the letter of instruction, admission, and inclusive of a consent judgment subsequently entered, we still maintain our ground, digging into the undertones to ensure that there was no criminal, perhaps conspiracy among the parties of interest.
But the minister should, or the office of the minister should also be, I'm trying to get the words now, should also have interest in the liquidity, of states' accounts.
The governors confirmed their liquidity by individual letters of indemnity admitting and authorizing the deduction, and these are the copies of individual letters signed by each and every governor. For your information, perhaps, maybe, I will begin by giving you this, and I want you to read it.
Before you get into that,
Yes.
let's get some other perspectives to this issue,
okay,
so that we don't belabor you so much, so that people can now get to know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
We've been waiting for the governor of Kaduna State, and I think he's going to be around any moment. But in the meantime, we have Reverend David Ogalo, Executive Director, African Network for Environmental and Economic Justice, ANIJ. Reverend, what have you made, I must say, what have you made out of the Attorney General's explanation of the controversy surrounding this very deduction to be or not to be as being put forward, and then the issues at stake between the states, local governments, and the federal government on the other hand?
Thank you, my good friend. Again, I also want to thank the Attorney General for taking out time to explain to Nigerians, and this is what democracy is all about. I must thank the Attorney General for also making available documents that he has shown publicly now to Nigerians. And then there are lessons from all this. As you know, some of us who were involved in the campaign for debt relief for Nigeria, which led to the Paris Club debt relief to Nigeria, you can see that the conversations around the benefit has not been very helpful. For the common Nigerians, there will be serious concern, particularly against the background like Madam rightly noted. When you look the economic situation today in the country, every $1 is very important. But when you hear that at highest level, 3 billion, how it is managed, and the role of Argon, and you see the correspondence between Argon and private companies, and some private companies in collaboration with foreign companies, and what role are they playing? This is Nigerian money, for God's sake. And then people, because of their legal fees here and there, they are making benefit at the expense of Nigeria. You can see how the Attorney General is going through this process now, trying to explain to Nigerians. But the average Nigerians will not be happy with this situation, I can tell you. Because the profit that these private companies are making out of Nigerian could have been avoided completely. And some of us who have been campaigning internationally, we're very concerned about how legal firms make profit out of the common man. And in this instance, the effort that the Attorney General have taken to explain to Nigerians, I can assure you that if before now those documents were put in the website of the Attorney General, for example, the Ministry of Justice, it would have been very helpful, and the Attorney General would have got the support of Nigerians. Because if you look the effort that the Attorney General have taken in communicating to all stakeholders, not just the Argon, not the Governors Forum alone, even individually, and there was somehow a consensus at that level, even at the court. And in all these instances, the victim, which is the common Nigerians, were not party to it. The common Nigerians, the people, the owners of this money. So sometimes the people are supposed to be the principal. But when you have government officials turn themselves to be the principal, there is a problem. So you can see the effort that the Attorney General, the Ministry of Justice took by reaching out to the Governors Forum, by reaching out to Argon, and they reaffirmed this consensus that made it possible for this exploitation. I call it exploitation because it could have been avoided. I do know, for instance, that the Ministry of Justice have lawyers, and I do know that Argon, as an institution, they have lawyers across the 774 local government. I don't see anything those private lawyers did that is an exceptional, that will enable them to rip off poor local government across the country. This is rip off. And it's unacceptable. So, but here we are. We live in a country that those who are supposed to be running affairs of the people turn themselves to the principle of the people. And when you have a challenge of access of information. So my advice is that I would like to appeal to the Attorney General that some of this information should be made available to Nigerians so that Nigerians will be in a better position to hold that gun accountable, to hold the Nigerian Governors Forum accountable. Because, the implication is that all eyes are pointing to the Ministry of Justice. All eyes are pointing to Malami. That is the problem. If nobody have told him, I'm his friend, I will tell him publicly today. If you read Nigerian newspaper today, after this administration, Malami will be the highest if you Google the internet. When you Google the internet, Malami, Paris Club, refund. But you can see the document he has presented to Nigerians. So I like to appeal to Mr. Malami that the challenge that we have in the country today is that poor Nigerians don't have access to this information. This is the first time, even though I took part in the campaign for debt relief for Nigeria. When Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, both of us was in Switzerland campaigning for debt relief for Nigerians, because we thought that when the benefit come to Nigerians, the poor people of Nigeria will be the benefactor. But today what has happened? You saw that private lawyers are gone as an institution that's supposed to defend the interests of the 774 local government. You can see how they mortgage the future, the benefits of the people for private lawyers who sit in Paris and in Switzerland, making profit out of the country. So the average Nigerians will not be happy with this. And so we will demand very clearly.
Allow me to come in a bit. Reverend, I'm sorry. Yes, allow me to come in a bit so that so that we can also move forward. We have other issues we would like to also look at. Recovered loot. It's something that Nigerians are also interested. But back again to the Paris Club refund. One of the issues that the Governors Forum raised is the issue about having to deduct such payments directly from the Federation account. I know that whatever that is in the Federation account and allocated to different states is a collective ownership of the state, and it has to be disbursed based on the budgetary laws, and of course sanctioned by the different legislative houses. So is it what do you make of that? Because that's one issue that the state governors have raised.
That's what I'm saying now, that it is when you look the law of the country, even when the decision was taken for the debt relief, the local government were not consulted. During Obasanjo time, when the decisions to repay some part of the debt so that we can secure that debt relief, it was a decision that was raised without consultation with the local government. And we normally say that a house built without the right foundation, what happens? It doesn't work well. So decision taken at that level without looking resort to the constitution of the country. For example, if you deep hand, there are constitution guiding how the resource of the country is used. The Nigerian constitution is very clear. But how you manage that particular provision of the constitution, it's also the political will of the current leadership. So like you rightly noted, the laws are not followed. The rules are not followed. Even at the local government, even when the state governors were writing, they didn't consult their state House of Assembly. So it is an executive decisions that we are taking at that level. So even when the decision for repaying some part of the Paris Club debt that enabled us to secure that debt relief from Paris Club, we raised question during Obasanjo's time that the money you are using to do this repayment do not belong to the executive federal government alone. But what happened? It was ignored. And this is the consequence today. So the same thing applies to the governors as well too. When they take decision, they hardly make a reference to the House of Assembly that is constitutionally empowered to take decision to appropriate according to the Constitution. And when that doesn't happen, you have this kind of illegality. For example, the AGON. When you know at this even local government level, there is the legislative arm, there's the executive arm. AGON is constituted by the executive arm. Every letter that the AGON wrote to the Attorney General, I can agree with you that none of these AGON chairmen consulted with their legislative arm. So when they are writing a letter, and so that's another thing I will bring to the attention of the Attorney General. For example, as a chairman of a local government, I am writing a letter to the Attorney General of a country on issue based on resources. And there are constitutions that guide how resources should be allocated. It's only necessary to also make a reference to see if the due process were followed. And that's why some of us are also raising questions about how the executive arm of government goes out to contract loan. When the processes of contracting loans are not followed, what now happen? And that's why we call such debt an odious debt. Because debt becomes odious when it doesn't follow the legal process. So this is the real problem we are facing in the country today. AGON did not follow due process by consulting the legislative arm of government. They wrote letter to the Attorney General. So they reached a consensus with the governors, and those governors also did not reach a consensus with the House of Assembly. So here we are today.
Questions have been raised here and issues are coming up, but unfortunately, those to respond to them appropriately are not here, talking about AGON, talking about the governors and the rest of them. But nonetheless, at least we'll get some other facts and figures and information from the Attorney General of the Federation. You were earlier trying to explain further how the subnationals are trying to sort of, renegade their agreements and then start taking up some other issues that could not be. The federal government, the Attorney General, you yourself and the Minister of Justice is having the facts and figures as you've been showing us. And it seems as if Nigerians are yet in the dark, talking about where to, therefore, what's really happening with us in the state and the local governments. How do we get into that? $418 million, $318 million, $3 million. I mean, the figures are just there and people are there really languishing in poverty, as Claire rightly pointed out.
Well, I think fundamentally it's about constitutionality and compliance with the necessary processes, both legislative, executive processes, and associated legal considerations where the need for judicial considerations set in. That point has been raised by Reverend David, which I agree entirely with him. And the fact remains that we are operating a system that to a larger extent is bedeviled with a lot of impunities. And that constitutes the issue. When you are talking of a local government, for example, the question is whether within the context of governance, they are allowed to operate in line, in spirit, and in compliance with the necessary legal process. My answer is no. A situation where the financial autonomy of the local government, for example, is being expressly trampled often by the state, it does not augur well for the system because it does not allow for consummation of incidental processes. A situation whereby the Governors Forum, for example, operates perhaps as an island, while in actual fact it is indeed meant to address a collective interest of the Nigerians, and it is indeed not operating in that direction, but perhaps maybe allowing some vested and personal interest to override the public interest. That is the result of what we are seeing. But above all, for your further information, and I think a further issue of interest, is the fact that over time, the AGON, and indeed through the instrumentality of the Governors Forum, presented a claim before the federal government of the amount in contention, the 318. And when part payment was made for the entire Paris Club deduction, refund meant for the governors, meant for the local governments, they took steps to indeed effect part payment to the consultant. Themselves. That establishes a point that they are indeed in no way contesting. And when this matter became an issue of contest, a judicial contest, the Algon and the Governors Forum submitted to a consent judgment before the court of law, agreeing that these deductions be effected and this payment be made. So this is the irony of it. So what are you now talking about? First, having engaged the consultant in your own right. Two, submitting to a consent judgment. Three, effecting payments in your own right. Four, providing a letter of no objection by Algon. Five, letters of indemnity by the governors, all suggesting and approving that the federal government should effect payment. Are you now saying the federal government should now allow itself to be subjected to ridicule, subjected to embarrassment arising from attachment of its assets, taking into consideration that at a point an action is instituted against the interest of the federal government, and this time even joining the Algon as a party, as a plaintiff against the federal government, and the federal government, the Attorney General, will now fall arms and allow the execution of the judgment against the interest of the federal government? That is one of contention. Nothing more, nothing less.
What will be the implication of non-payment of this monies to the contractor?
The implication of non-payment can best be read if you look at the order absolute, which is indeed an order dated 7th, let me be precise on the order, March 2015, by an order.
What's the order say?
I'll read with your permission. After hearing Ahmad Raji SAN with Adiola Adedipe Esquire for Ganishi, the Ganishi here is CBN, urging court to grant the reliefs as contained in the preliminary objection and Prince Nwafo Orizo, the court ordered as follows. It is hereby ordered as follows: that the application for third parties applicants herein struck out. That order, NICE, dated 1st day of April 2015, is hereby made absolute. And the implication of an absolute order, they are now given a blanket check to go ahead and execute the judgment against the federal government of Nigeria, Attorney General of the Federation, Honorable Minister of Finance, Accountant General of the Federation, and the Central Bank. Which order are they given the blanket check to execute? An order that the Ganishi CBN shall pay as a matter of obligation over the judgment date of 3,188,505.99 to the local governments in Nigeria to be warehoused in the central bank for the disbursement to them less 20% consultancy fees, which is meant for the consultant. So that is the implication. The implication is simple, that the federal government will be embarrassed. The federal government, the asset of the federal government will be attached. What kind of assets? That's inclusive of the financial asset. So the foreign reserve of the Nigerian government has been and any other associated income of the federal government in monetary sense that is deposited in the federal government in the central bank can now be executed upon, and the payment be made to Algon, and the payment be made to the consultant. Arising from the judgment, with judgment, the Algon, the Governors Forum, refused to defend in court.
But when the first payment was made by the NGF,
yes,
how was that payment made, and what prompted the stoppage?
By their instruction to the Central Bank of Nigeria, the payment was made to the Governors Forum, which amount they collected, and then part of which amount they paid onto the consultant. By their instruction, on account of this judgment, they processed letters of request, directing the central bank that our monies kept in the in this account with the central bank be paid on to the governors forum, and then thereafter they now process part payment to the consultants on their own. But
sorry, Nadabo, does the FG have the mandate of the governors forum to make this payment directly?
I have read earlier, maybe you are not following
yes,
this respect.
Because I want to know how.
Given earlier a letter of no objection by them, which you may wish to perhaps, you can go through this letter if you may wish. You can read it over, maybe.
No objection to the payment of legal fees. Okay, this is the Office of the Chairman, Board of Incorporated Trustees. I've gone to the Honorable Attorney General, Minister of Justice, and it says no objection to the payment of legal fees of $318 million to Edwards and Partners Law Firm in line with the Department of State Securities. And it goes on to say that with the Department of State Securities and judgment garnish order absolute regarding their engagement as solicitors and representatives. Okay, so by this no objection.
Yes. That is for the local government.
Yes, from the local government.
Now you can go through this as well. This is from the governors in their individual and respective right. You can read over to the public to their hearing.
Okay.
Well, but to me, having to have all this weather to the public may not really get us across to issues. The fact still remains, you can keep this one.
Yes.
The fact still remains that there is a controversy, there is a disagreement.
Yes.
All right, and we're all here in order not only to just put across the facts and let go like that, but to find solutions to them.
Yes.
And they say how, if I may call them dirty linens or whatever, shouldn't be washed in the marketplace, how these issues can be resolved amicably.
Well, it's a simple issue. It is about a compromise on an existing judgment of the court. Parties on their own can sit down, agree on how best to compromise, and they can make compromises. As far as the federal government is concerned, what matters is indeed there exists a judgment of the court, and there exists a consent, there exists a part payment initiated by the Algon and indeed with the understanding of the governors forum over time. If by their collective understanding with the consultant today, the entire judgment debt is forgiven.
There's a part.
Just a minute. When you say parties involved, Algon is there, the consultants are there, the state governors are there,
yes.
And you too, as the federal government should be there to be part of it. Is that what you're referring to?
Exactly.
Haven't that attempt been made so far in all this, just outside the courts?
In fact, the attempt was not only been made, but severally, on account of the fact that we are of the opinion that the possibility of having some compromises on this judgment were concerned, we took steps at the Federal Ministry of Justice level and indeed forced the consultants to compromise. For example, the original claim, as far as Ned Munir Nwoko is concerned, by the Governors Forum, the original judgment sum in his favor was in fact, we forced, arising from our intervention at the Federal Ministry of Justice, we forced a settlement of indeed about 50% concession arising therefrom, relating to one of the consultants. When the second one refused to any concession, that was Ted Edward, we now suggested that he should go to court and proceed and see the case to its logical conclusion. So we were making efforts to force them to submission, and arising from that effort, we had a 50% concession of the amount meant for one of the consultants, and then on account of that, the Governors Forum were asked now to allow for the payment, to make part payment in his favor. So at the Federal Ministry of Justice level, we came in because we were equally conscious of the fact that our mandate is the interest of justice and the public interest, and arising from that public interest, we forced the consultant to compromise relating to the figure that was meant to be fed for them.
Okay, I have this of course this letter which is addressed to the Honorable Minister of Finance, and it's 29th November 2016, over deductions and Paris and London club loans on the accounts of states and local governments 1995 to 2022. I just like to read. It's signed by Owele Anayo Rocha Sokorocha, Executive Governor of Imo State. And paragraphs 2 and 3 reads, in the event that it is discovered that the amount paid or disbursed is higher than the amount due, refund deduction should be made directly from the Federation account. Now, the third part, finally, I authorize the deduction of our share of the legal fees relating to this matter and payable to the Nigeria Governors Forum account.
Next letter, perhaps, maybe. This is one of the governors as he then was.
Yes. Yeah. So, deductions. Yes. I don't have the other letter. But my question is, Honorable Minister of Justice, in all of the issues going on, conversations going on, the name of the office of the Honorable Minister of Justice has been, it's frequently been mentioned, and the critics believe that you have an interest, you have a vested interest. That's why you are taking it up and not considering, the very tight economic disposition of both the states, the people of Nigeria, and that is why you are bent on having this money paid to these private consultants rather than looking for a way of, helping the states themselves.
Well, I think that is indeed a clear misconception. It is a clear misconception, again, the background of the fact that first, as I rightly place it before you, that the Office of the Attorney General was a dependent in a case in which the Algons themselves allow themselves to be used as a co-plaintiff against the interest of the federal government and indeed the Office of the Attorney General, Minister of Finance. So the interest of the Office of the Attorney General is not far-fetched, taking into consideration the fact that the Attorney General of the Federation was made a party. The Attorney General of the Federation had taken steps to indeed defend the federal government over it, even when the Governors Forum and indeed even when the Governors Forum and indeed the Algon submitted to consent judgment, the Office of the Attorney General has forced, indeed, arising from the participation of the Office of the Attorney General in the matter, has forced the consultant to submission by way of clear reduction of 50% of the amount in contention. The Office of the Attorney General has equally developed interest against the background of the fact that certain criminal undertones investigations associated with the judgments was indeed ordered by the Office of the Attorney General. So I think the interest of the Attorney General, as far as the protection of the state, protection of the federal government, as far as these claims are concerned, has indeed been established in the direction of the interest of justice, in the direction of the public interest, which the Office of the Attorney General has indeed labored to ensure at the end of the day that the federal government is supported in avoiding the liability arising from engagements that have been established, one, by Algon, two, by Governors Forum, and in respect of which no attempt was being made by Algon and the Governors Forum to defend.
Okay, thank you so much, Attorney General. We will take a break, but before we do that, let's hear finally, because right after the break, we should be headed to the final and last topic, that's the looted funds. Reverend Ogalo, Reverend David Ugolo, you've heard what the Attorney General said and the compositions on and on about that. My interest and then the interest of this very program is to see how these things could be resolved amicably. He has put forward, efforts being made and steps being taken to resolve this issue. What other thing would you add briefly, maybe in 60 seconds or so? Could the minister and the ministry and the federal government do, and the states and the local governments and of course the consultants doing what I'd see to it that these things don't go beyond proportion?
First, I want to thank the Attorney General for, again, this is democracy in the working. And I also want to thank the NTA management. This is really a huge opportunity for Nigerians to see how. And there's a local parable in our parlance that when two friends claim that they are friends, you only know whether they are friends when money comes. And when money come, how they share the money will tell you whether they are really friends. So what has happened is that the fat payment has caused this problem. You can see the collusion between the NGF, the Nigerian Governors Forum, AGON, in an attempt to help a private company to make money out of Nigerians. And so any settlement that do not take the interests of Nigerians into consideration will not stand. Even after this administration, this Paris Club, if not properly handled, it will haunt all the stakeholders. And so as a civil society activist, what I will advocate and call for is that I appeal to my good friend, Malami, the Attorney General, that this 1 hour is not enough to tell Nigerians what has happened. The website of the Attorney General, the Ministry of Justice, is a platform Nigerians go. It will be good for Nigerians to know all those documents that the Attorney General have displayed to Nigerians today. It should be uploaded to the website. Let Nigerians continue the conversation. NGF will come to equity. Agon, even the private company, because one of the first steps we will take as civil society, we are very interested in this case, the people of Nigerians, they have to be involved in the conversation. It's not a decision that Agon and NGF and the Ministry of Justice can resolve. Because like Attorney General alluded to the issue of impunity, the executive arms of government cannot take decision alone when it comes to issue of money. There are due process. If the chairman of a local government writes a letter that borders on issue of resources and the legislative arm is not carried along, then the NGF in Abuja cannot speak on behalf of any state when the House of Assembly of that state has not appropriated appropriately. So the issue is bigger than this. Even the court, where some of these judgments are entered into, as time proceeds, the people of Nigeria will begin to appear in those courts. So that we begin to demand that this culture of impunity will end. So it's not an issue that these few people can discuss and end. So the first thing is to have access to information. With access to information, people will be able to contribute to the debate. And it's now, and I'm happy that the Attorney General have come forward to tell Nigerians what the situation is. It is now the responsibility of Nigerians to take this forward. And not just Nigerians, the president of the country, President Buhari, has the responsibility to call for an independent investigation so that Nigerians can be properly appreciate what has happened so far. Because $1 million, $2 million, we are talking about $3 billion in the face of the challenge. As we speak now, Nigerian debt is piling up.
Thank you, Reverend Ugolo. Thank you. Children. Thank you. Let's pause you for a while. Just a final wrap up on this topic before we delve into the recovered loots. Honorable Minister of Justice, the President, as we have read, has said the further deductions should be halted. What going forward, what is going to happen to that? And has the Paris Club proceedings, is it still available?
Well,
or have you exhausted it?
First, let me state for the record, I think it's important that the Paris Club claim or contention that we are discussing here this morning was indeed on the basis of a judgment in 2023 and early 2025 before
2003
2013.
Okay, 2013.
Yeah, 2013 and indeed 2015 before the coming in place of government of President Muhammadu Buhari. So for the record, it is important to state clearly that it was indeed inherited issue that started in 2011 with the engagement of the consultants by Algon and the subsequent issues that boils down to a consent judgment in 2013, in respect of which the governors, that is the Governors Forum and indeed Algon, were commonly in agreement as it relates to the consent judgment. It was not a liability that was occasioned by the government of President Muhammadu Buhari. Now, when these contentions now, taking into consideration the subsequent events, going forth and back and forth over it set in, we have taken a decision as a government that let us deliberate on these issues before the Federal Executive Council. And then a memo was presented relating to the Paris Club and incidental judgments, high-profile judgments that have been incurred over time, substantially and mostly before coming in place of the government of President Muhammadu Buhari, and then a council memo was presented. It was deliberated upon. Arising from the transparency and accountability of government of President Muhammadu Buhari, it was eventually decided that the memo relating to this should be stepped down, and then a cabinet committee
the memo relating to the
deductions on Paris Club and high profile inherited judgment debt be stepped down to allow for the formation of a cabinet committee under the chairmanship of the vice president, so that the parties can now be brought to the table to deliberate on it out of desire for transparency and accountability. And this time, not exclusively with the judicial consideration in mind, but indeed extended executive consideration and the associated incidental parties of interest. And that is where we are. The memo relating to the deductions has been placed on table before the Federal Executive Council. The Federal Executive Council deliberated upon it, and on the advice of the Attorney General for that matter, for the record, the memo was stepped down, and then a cabinet committee was put in place by President Muhammadu Buhari under the chairmanship of the vice president to look into the matters with a view to inviting the ALGON, with a view to inviting the Governors Forum, and indeed other ministries, departments, and agencies of government of interest to table to look into it objectively and to look into the justiciability of it and take a decision.
Is there a timeline to that event?
Well, no timeline has been fixed, but then, as you rightly know, this government has, limited time to wind off, and I believe it will be as quickly as possible. It will be done as quickly as possible. It is an inherited problem, and it is a problem that we are addressing. We are trying as a government of the day to address.
Just like Reverend Ogolo said, this thing needs to be brought to the public domain so that lots of Nigerians should really get to know. We here too really want to get to know. That's why I'm asking about the timeline. We'll come back here much again and then talk about these issues and how they have been resolved, especially with the local government ALGON, that is, and then the Governors Forum to being part of the conversation. It's unfortunate we couldn't get any one of them this morning, but I think in our next tradition we will do that. It's Good Morning Nigeria. We'll look at the looted funds in a moment. Stay with us. We'll be talking about the looted funds in the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, and I think we've got that limited time to talk about such a huge and a very big topic, Claire. But all the same, let's just get started and then see what justice we can make to that. And then, Minister Malemi, the looted funds or the recovered looted funds have been a bone of contention in this country. And when this administration came on board, it had fighting corruption as one of its cardinal principles to pursue. And then we've seen a lot being done in that direction and in that regard. However, Nigerians are still maybe in the dark, if I may use the phrase, about how much was looted, how much was used, where is the remaining, and what are we going to do? So many talks have been going about on this issue. Could you just maybe in 120 seconds give us the background as to what was, recovered, and then so far, how far?
Well, let me begin by way of addressing your first question as to how much is looted. That is a question that cannot have a precise, direct, and positive answer. Again, the background of the fact that what has been looted has constituted a subject of investigation over time.
Since then?
And ever since, day in, day out, traces have been made and recoveries have been made.
Okay.
So again, the background of the continuity of the investigation process in terms of tracing the looted assets, it is not a question that I can say with precision. But then coming down to the issue of recovered loots, how much was recovered, I think it's an area in which I can give some level of insight.
Okay.
First, as you can very well, I believe, recall, the first major recovery made by the federal government was the $322 million recovered from Switzerland. And that money, by the common understanding of the parties, inclusive of the island of Jersey, the UK, the US, which were indeed the jurisdiction through which those recovered loads passed through, the parties came to terms and agreed that the amount should be a kind of deployed in addressing poverty that characterized the polity as at 2015 when President Muhammadu Buhari came on board. And that recovery was indeed effected in 2017. Okay. And it was the money that was deployed on major social intervention programs. Interventions like N-Power, interventions like trader money, interventions like school feeding program, and a host of other interventions that were targeted at the poor segment of the Nigerian society. So our reputation as a nation, arising from commitment associated with the deployment of recovered asset, was internationally acknowledged with that in mind, and our further efforts to make further recovery, which was the $311 million, was as a result enhanced. We succeeded subsequently in recovering additional $311 million from US, which amount by the international understanding of the parties was to be deployed in the infrastructural development of Nigeria. I am happy to report that that money was what was being deployed, what was being utilized in the execution of the major infrastructural projects in Nigeria, inclusive of the second Niger Bridge, which has reached an advanced stage of completion, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, and then Abuja-Kano Expressway, among others. So these were the major recoveries made. But then there were a host of other recoveries made. Of recent, in the first 18 months, we have equally recovered, I think, around 6 million euros, among others. And then we kept recovering locally and internationally. The statistics is very difficult for me to capture, taking into consideration the figures involved, but then the true position of things, our efforts in terms of recoveries of looted assets had proven to be a successful one. But the issue of interest, I think, is not only about the recovery in its own right, but what is it that we have equally done in terms of making efforts to save the federal government the embarrassment of execution of the judgments that to our minds are fraudulent, among others. Of particular interest, which constitutes an establishment of the position of the office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, is the fact that as at the time we came in place on board, there was a judgment relating to P and ID case, which runs to around $10 billion. And we have succeeded in trying as much as possible to avoid liability in terms of ensuring that the no enforcement against the asset of the federal government is occasioned. And we have, been the first country ever in the world succeeded in not only the stopping the enforcement of that judgment, but indeed contesting it and giving an opportunity to raise issues that are targeted at setting the judgment aside. So what I'm saying, in essence, we are not working only in terms of recovery, but we are working in terms of avoidance of liability against the interests of the federal government in multiple of cases. Okay, let me bring in Reverend David Ogolo, who has been keeping an eye on how these recovered loots, have been deployed. Reverend, you have been following the money, the looted, recovered loots. So far, we've heard of the minister has told us of pounds. He has also told us about dollars, and I'm sure there is also the real, which he talked about. All our monies that have been recovered, But how have these monies benefited us, the public? Can you tell us, if you know?
First, again, I want to thank the NTA and also thank the Attorney General. I know that the Attorney General will recall that in the instance of the Abuja, which is the $325.5 million, he was the one who signed the agreement with the Swiss and the World Bank in Washington in 2017. And in that MOU reached with the federal government, there was an express provisions that make references to the need for civil society to be incorporated to ensure that the issue of monitoring comes to prevail. But just to give you a background before the Abacha coup, there was $700 million that was returned to Nigeria before the President Buhari administration. And you know, we also came out with a report when we monitored that first instance that came to Nigeria. There were schools that were claimed that then Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was the finance minister, that they used the money to build. And some of us went to those schools were not in existence. And roads that were built with those money, some of those roads were not there. So it was against the background of that lack of transparency and accountability in the first transfer of the Abacha's money from Switzerland that I think informed why the Swiss government, through their court ruling, they decided that they need to now put eye on how money returned back to Nigeria is used. And I'm happy that the Attorney General led the federal government delegation to Washington, where about 4 countries came together under the GIFA, and they came out with the principle, and then the Abacha coup was signed. And the Attorney General also gave us support in Nigeria, civil society. He made it possible for us to work closely with the National Cash Transfer Office. For the first time in history, first time, I repeat, and as an expert on asset recovery, not just an expert of over 30 years, my master's degree in the University of Sussex was majored on asset management. It is only in Nigeria that civil society have an access to information as to how recovered asset is being used in the country. My colleagues in other countries, they hardly have this information. And so in Abacha coup, when you compare it to Abacha 1, the difference is clear. The money was purely used for cash transfer program for the poorest of the poorest in Nigeria. Over 1.9 million poor Nigerians. I can confirm, having monitored this process for the last 2 years, that the money, 5,000 naira going to poor people in Nigeria, the first time in Africa and in the world that you see that recovered money is going to the victim. Poor Nigerians across the country benefited, which is still ongoing, and that the Abacha money was given to poor people, 5,000 naira. You know, sometimes people sit down in Abuja and say, what is 5,000 naira? But I've seen poor people who never had an access to this kind of money before. Consistently for over a year, 2 years, they were receiving this money. It enabled them to buy their medicine. It enabled them to enter into cooperative society to do trading. And as we speak today, Abacha II has been adjudged as a gold standard by officials of the US government. Because when you see how the Nigerian government have provided a framework that enabled civil society to monitor the entire process, you have every reason to say that there have been a little improvement, and 1.9 million Nigerians, and they were not selected by and picked by politicians. It was through a scientific process designed by the World Bank in collaboration with the Nigerian government that the social register was designed in Nigeria, where those who were selected across the country benefited from this Abacha. So the first time our campaign, we can say that poor people benefited for the return of Nigerian money to the country. So in Abacha 3, which is the last one that the minister mentioned of the 3 major infrastructure, you know, this happened because many Nigerians came to the understanding that, why do you share the money? Let's use it for a major project. So I think Buhari responded by making sure that encouraged the Attorney General and his people in the Ministry of Justice. And so they decided to pull the Abacha 3, which is the $311 million, into major project, which is the Kano, the second bridge, the Niger Bridge, and the Lagos-Ibadan Road, which is currently ongoing. At least Nigerians can also say, for the first time in history, that the money recovered on Abacha 3 is going to 3 major roads. And that process is ongoing, which we are keeping our eye also on it.
Reverend Ugolo, thank you. Let's have a final contribution from the Honorable Minister. In just, if you can, for us, it would be grateful in less than 60 seconds. The forfeited assets, I mean, what is happening to them?
Well, the forfeited assets, what we try to do is to institutionalize the process. Before now, there has never been in existence any institutionalized process of dealing, management, and indeed disposal of the recovered assets. Now we have in place a Process of Crime Act 2022, which has now provided the legislative framework as a starting point. And then we have equally put in place before then an interministerial committee which involve almost all the agencies of government that are in one way or the other responsible for the recovery of assets, or perhaps giving professional opinion as to how best things can be done, inclusive of the assets valuation unit of the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, and among others, indeed the DPR for the purpose of measuring the oil asset, among others, which has indeed worked wonderfully well. Among the recovered assets, some institutions of government which were started with have benefited therefrom upon payment of a consideration as valued and assessed. So what I'm saying in essence, the issue of the disposal of recovered assets is ongoing and is going on wonderfully well. But arising from the innovations introduced by the Process of Crime Act of recent, those assets that have been profiled over time by different ministries, departments, and agencies of government are returned back to them for the purpose of disposing, establishing a directorate in their respective units, and then ensuring that the proceeds are realized in line with the regulations provided.
Honorable Minister of Justice, Honorable Minister of Justice, we've just scratched the surface of this conversation.
Thank you.
And you can rest assured that we'll invite you just very soon, sooner than expect, for a part 2 of it. The use of deployment of looted funds. Honorable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's also appreciate Reverend David Ugala, Executive Director, African Network for Environmental and Economic Justice. We'd like to thank you for all the perspectives that you have put up. Thank you very much for joining us. All right, and that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Do join us again. That's tomorrow for another edition. I am Claire Adilabo Abdul Razak. Always remember, take action against rape and rapists.
And I'm Yusuf Nadabus. See you again tomorrow.